we believe. Now, coincidentally or not, the government happens to have pushed out a new grant for a local vehicle electric charging firm today. Earlier, I spoke to the Assistant Minister to the Minister for Industry, Energy and Emissions Reduction. This is Tim Wilson on that announcement and other issues of the week. Well, Tim Wilson, welcome back to Afternoon Briefing for the year. Within your portfolio responsibilities, there's I think it's fair to say, modest commitment of money for electric vehicles. Of course, the sector is asking for so much more, but what are the details of what the government's putting on the table today?
Well, it's not modest, it's just one part of a much bigger package. Last year, we announced $2.1 billion as part of our future fuels strategy to really make sure the country can make its transition for new fuels, whether it be electric vehicles or hydrogen fuel cell passenger vehicles or freight vehicles. But we've announced $6.1 million for one of the major innovators in Australia, JetCharge, which is a company based in Melbourne. And I visited it recently, where they're really looking at how they're leading edge in terms of investing in charging stations, in community centres and locations, as well as households and apartment buildings. And it's going to be a critical part of building the EV strategy for the country.
And so what would these small number, $6 million, what is it that would fund this company to do?
Well, it's essentially to upgrade its capacity to be able to roll out. The sector is still very much in its infancy, but they've got some really exciting technology ranging from your traditional charging station to ones that are done essentially wireless like you do on your mobile phone, but instead for your car. So we're building up their capacity to be able to install them in apartment buildings, office blocks, and of course also in public locations, including with appropriate charging facilities in places like train stations.
Now, we've seen crossbenchers, Bob Catter, Andrew Wilkie and others out riding in an electric bus this morning, really trying to cajole the big parties and future governments of this country to go much, much further, to really tax up on internal combustion fossil fuels, to get to that price tipping point where electric vehicles are affordable for most Australians. We're so far short of that. When will those more substantive policy levers be pulled on electric vehicles?
Well, the most substantive policy lever we can have is to make sure that we address the core concerns that Australians have about electric vehicles. Now, price is one of them, but that's being chopped every single day. A few years ago, an EV in Australia was 300 grand. Today, they're trending towards 60, 50, and once they become price competitive, they'll be viable. We're talking about, not just some people, but all Australians having that choice. And
but you come at it from a perspective where the market has to get there. There's not going to be cruder tools like subsidies on one hand or taxing fossil fuels out of
well, we already know that fossil fuels actually have taxes. There's various taxes on things like petrol. But we want to empower every Australian to have that opportunity to continue the cost pressure down. If we subsidise expensive cars, then we're essentially giving tax offsets to the rich who can afford that choice. Most Australians are sensible. They're proportionate. They're going to address whether their car is petrol-based or diesel-based to an electric vehicle based on when the existing life cycle of their car is finished. But it's only one part of the challenge. One of the other big parts is, of course, range anxiety. In fact, in WA, for instance, surveys show it's the biggest concern of consumers, not price. And that's why we're investing that $2.1 billion to put in the infrastructure. So whether people want to drive from Melbourne to Sydney or Melbourne to Canberra or wherever it is every day, they have the freedom to do so. And that's what's going to lead them to change over to an EV or a hydrogen fuel cell car in the future.
All right. Well, I'm sure there'll be much more discussion about EVs in the context of the campaign that is now looming. Let's talk about what's happening in this building right now, though. The House of Reps is sitting for the second to last week of the 46th Parliament, and we are seeing what Labor calls the weaponisation of national security. We've heard the Prime Minister and Peter Dutton essentially saying Labor is a risk when it comes to China. How does that not undermine Australia's political unity and defences against foreign interference?
Well, the biggest weakness against the unity in the country is if we've got the Labor Party who are divided on this. Recently, we heard Bob Carr himself go out and weaponise national security for his own aims. And this is a common trait inside the Labor Party because they're not united on their position on China. Now, there are good people, I've no doubt, in Labor on some of these issues, but unfortunately and tragically, it's not all of them. We need a strong front, and the point that the Minister for Defence, Peter Dutton, has made is that, and again, using Bob Carr's test, who stands to benefit from a change of government? And he's made it clear that there are obviously foreign actors who see the advantage and opportunity. In addition to that, we've seen plots recently exposed by ASIO, which have brought into question who some parties are being targeted or motivated to run for office in the hope that it can hijack our political system.
Well, I think the Director General of ASIO made the point that although there's been public reporting about one party, the Labor Party, it's not unique to Labor Party. Those targeting exercises have crossed the political divide. So are you entirely confident that no one has been able to penetrate the Liberal Party machine in any way?
Well, what I'm absolutely confident of is that the Liberal Party has no appetite, and we will actively seek out should there be any attempt, because national security and standing up for a strong Australia is at the core of who we are. We're by our nature, political patriots, and proudly so, and there'll be no truck. But the question then goes ultimately to the Labor Party. We know we've had relationships between former Senator Sam Dastyari and Chinese donors. These are serious issues, and unfortunately it seems like there's a continuing trail, and we need to make sure that there's integrity in our electoral system, there's integrity in our national security, and there's integrity from our political system to stand up and call these actions out. So
when you hear someone like Kimberley Kitching, some people might say courageously using parliamentary privilege to name an individual there, is that interpreted by you as strong defences by Labor against those sort of attempts at targeting?
Well, ultimately, I don't know the basis of her allegation, and that's not to take anything away from it. But I always encourage all members of Parliament, whatever side they're from, to stand up for our national interest and, of course, for our national security. And, of course, those questions were put to ASIO. They've declined to comment. I understand why, but the principle remains, because that is at the core of what makes our nation strong, is Australians seeing their national security as paramount. But when it comes down to it, I'm absolutely confident that Australians, when they have a choice, know that they can trust it with the Coalition and the Liberal Party, frankly, more than they can with the Labor Party.
All right, well, that certainly matches the Prime Minister's own accusations delivered in the Parliament. Tim Wilson, will no doubt be speaking to you again before too long on our afternoon briefing. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me, Greg.